lot of people would have you believe that AEW is in trouble or that it is dying, and partially you'd be correct. On one hand, you have just a few weeks ago, they hit their lowest rating ever again for a Dynamite episode at just over 300,000 viewers. Not to mention, it's been so long since they were over 1 million viewers, and selling out arenas is about as prehistoric as the dinosaurs. Not that dinosaur. But on the other hand, you've got the good news of Warner Bros. Discovery having renewed their media rights deal with All Elite Wrestling to allow AEW to stream pay-per-views, Dynamite, and Collision on Max. They also have one of the greatest assembled rosters I think I've ever seen. Moxley, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Okada, Takeshita, Chris Jericho, Mariah May, Adam Cole, Mercedes Moné, House of Black, Christian Cage, Ricky Starks, Daniel Garcia, Darby Allin, Eddie Kingston, FTR, Samoa Joe, Britt Baker, Hook, Edge, Hangman Adam Page, Shibata, Ibushi, Swerve Strickland, the Bang Bang Gang, Bryan Danielson, well, they did have Bryan Danielson, Claudio Castagnoli, the Bastard Pack, even a guy like Jack Perry, who for a while I had a bit of a grudge against because of what he did to my best friend in the whole wide world, Phil. I miss him. I miss him so much. Anyway, yeah, once I looked past all of that, I said, this guy's actually kind of cold. He's actually, like most of us, I loved Jungle Boy. It was a great time. And then he was kind of mid finding his way in this new character for a while, but eventually he grew into something, and I think he's pretty solid nowadays, so credit where it's due. Also, not to mention, I do kind of fuck with the way he lost to Bryan Danielson.
Jack Perry just opened himself up, so give it to me!
In that way where he kind of just watched Bryan Danielson as he would like kind of laughed in his face like a maniacal bastard, kind of in that Bray Wyatt style as he took that knee straight to the jaw. That was kind of icy, I'm not gonna lie. And of course, Will. Let me tell you something about Will Ospreay. I don't care what he's doing, I just know that I will be there. The way I love the Assassin's Creed franchise so much, and this guy who is also British like me is like the reincarnation of Ezio Auditore da Firenze. Nah, he's icy, bro. Oh, and speaking of my fellow bruvs and brothers, let me talk about Bruv Her, the return of the second coming of that 70s show, Jamie Bloody Hater. She is special. And while we're speaking about special women's professional wrestlers and special professional wrestlers in general that I absolutely adore in the AEW realm, Willow Nightingale and Chris Statlander. These two women put on one of my personal matches of the year back at All Out. It fucking ruled. They both fucking rule. I love them both. Oh, and Timeless Toni Storm, you are one of my favorite people of all time, period. Absolutely magnificent, elegant, a flashback to the olden times, darling. Bravo. Not to mention the type shit that Tony's been on as of late. This dude now has the whole Hurt Business in his hands. He's got the whole damn Hurt in his hands. I truly do think if you play out the story of Swerve eventually getting sick of Prince Nana and joining the Hurt Business, it could be an all-timer story for this company. But in the meantime, we should just go ahead and marvel at the black excellence that is this image right here, Bobby Lashley and Swerve Strickland face to face. This is getting hung up in a museum someday. I'm serious. But as I speak about the type shit that Tony Khan's been on, let's talk about Tony Khan. My problem with Tony Khan is that while I really do admire his love for professional wrestling, and I see it and I get it, he needs to take a chill pill sometimes. Word to 2008. From being on screen a little too much to being in the ring in storylines like the one with the Young Bucks and his dad, which was just bad, to using his pen to write some truly awful storylines. It's truly like sometimes he thought he was the king, but a lot of the time he ended up being the jester. I think his incessant nature and his compulsive need to beat WWE comes at a great sacrifice of what could be, by and large, the greatest professional wrestling show of all time. I think AEW would flourish far more by not trying so hard to be WWE in areas, but rather just simply accepting that you are an alternative and leaning into that. You don't need to be a second coming of WWE because they do their things well and AEW does things well, and I think if you lean more into what actually makes you AEW, as you have in previous times, then you've struck gold with that. You've found diamonds, okay? Word to Minecraft. Because truthfully right now, WWE is in one of, if not its hottest era of all time. They're constantly putting on great PLE shows, their rosters are stacked across the board, and Triple H is breaking Gates records in his sleep. But as I said, when it comes to AEW, they definitely do execute on certain things well some of the time, and they need to focus on those things more. And hey, there's nothing wrong with being an alternative, okay? I mean, we all love alt girls, right? We all love goth girls that could stomp her entire being with their 9-inch wampa stompers.
If you sag off, your swag's off.
Also, the way the entire CM Punk saga was handled didn't help AEW or Tony Khan at all. Like, imagine having one of, if not the biggest return to the entire entire sport of pro wrestling on your very show, in your very company, and within 2 years he's working for the very competition that he said he hated for years. The very same company that he publicly trashed, understandably so, but the very same company that he trashed, that he hated, that he despised, that all the trauma came from, the injuries, the incessant time on the road and everything, the interview, all of that. And by the time he finally returns, AEW's time was so much more traumatic and awful for him that he was like, you know what, actually, that's where I should have been the whole time. That's nuts. Nuts with a capital N.
Wait a minute, what the hell?
Nuts. Insane nuts behavior, man. Like, how you gonna fumble a bad bitch like CM Punk? He's the bad bitch. Speaking of generational fumbles, AEW shit. AEW shit. Yeah, Mid Forever was not a great game, and in amongst all of the negative backlash, it didn't really help what was and maybe still is the downfall of AEW. But I already have made several videos on that game, most recently the Year Later retrospective, so if you're feeling oozy, go watch that retrospective video from a couple months ago to hear just how much of a dumpster fire that game might still be. Also, while we're talking about Tony Khan, you gotta delete the Twitter app off your phone sometimes, man. Because what really turns me off to wanting to support your show more than it being just bad is loading up the Bird app on my phone and seeing the owner of AEW act like a child on the timeline. But yeah, will Tony Ince McCahan realize his bad booking ways and eventually give the book to someone else? Only time will tell. Now, I won't go ahead and lie to you. I am by and large a very casual viewer of professional wrestling nowadays, far more than I've ever been before. I just don't have the urge anymore to watch every single weekly show every single week, and I don't even necessarily feel like I need to. I have so many other things I'd rather be doing, whether it's a new TV show or reruns of a favorite sitcom like Seinfeld, or working out, or watching a different sport entirely. I mean, I'd much rather talk to someone about my love for Tyrese Halliburton, or why Paolo Banchero's injury took a piece of my soul and destroyed it. The idea of sitting down for a 2 or 3 hour wrestling event doesn't thrill me with that same fire as much anymore, and I think that's okay. Everyone grows and everyone transitions into new eras of their life, and by and large I think we should be allowed to dip in and out of our interests, as I am with professional wrestling. And I mean, hell, if you take a look at my channel, obviously I'm still interested in professional wrestling. I'm not saying I'm losing interest on the entire thing, but I just think keeping up with current day stuff versus going back and watching like a weird network show or Total Divas or a worst episode of Raw, that to me is far more interesting, and I think that dying love of professional wrestling, I feel like by and large, much like a lot of these weekly shows, AEW Dynamite along with its partner shows don't really feel like must-watch television anymore. I feel like I can skip a weekly show nowadays because the same feeling I once had is dead. This fire no longer burns quite like it used to, and I know I'm not alone in that. I know there's a lot more fans that think that way when it comes to Dynamite. But I'll be damned if even in my slightly wavering interest of professional wrestling, I don't think back to that golden era of AEW in 2021, because that was generational. And I feel as though if I'm gonna touch on the downfall of their product, I have to briefly mention that AEW in 2021 will certainly never be forgotten. The momentum that this product had coming out of the initial pandemic lockdowns into having crowds again is like nothing I've ever seen before. You had Kenny Omega as the AEW World Champion in the midst of this sizzling rivalry with Hangman Adam Page. You had the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros. You had the emergence of Bryan Danielson in the midst of one of his greatest years, in my opinion. I mean, think about it. Bryan Danielson, in amongst himself, is an all-time legend, but he main evented WrestleMania in 2021 with 2 first ballot Hall of Famers, with 2 all-time legends in their own right, to going to Grand Slam and facing Kenny Omega. It was insane. You had the arrival of Adam Cole amidst one of his biggest decisions, which was to either leave WWE and go be awesome with his girlfriend and best friend, or, you know, stay in WWE and become a Yappager 9000. I think you made the right choice. And of course, how can you not mention CM Punk in his grand return to professional wrestling, which for as much as it may not have ended well in AEW, those initial times were magical. It's like every time I had the pleasure of seeing my childhood grapple again, it brought back a level of nostalgia that scientists themselves can't quite figure out. Like the special aura around All Elite Wrestling in mid to late 2021 specifically, They had me tuned in for Bobby Fish matches. How much fish could Bobby Fish fry if Bobby Fish could fry fish?
Wait for it.
I don't know, but I was there. And the absolute pinnacle of that was, of course, AEW All Out 2021, which in of itself deserves an entire different video. But a special shout out to other wrestlers like Christian Cage, Miro, Britt Baker, Jamie Hayter, John Moxley, Ruby Soho, Thunder Rosa, Chris Jericho, and MJF for making this era what it was too. And, you know, we don't talk about the random Big Show match that was on All Out 2021. In fact, I don't even know what you're talking about. You sound insane. Big Show he's never even been in AEW, so that's where you're wrong. Overall, do I think AEW is done? No, not really. I think even though the ship is a little shaky right now, they're gonna be just fine. Of course, it is a little bit worrying seeing the ratings drop so low, but at the same time, cable television is a dying piece of media, and we all know it. And I say this in the least incriminating way possible, but there's a lot of ways to watch wrestling nowadays. And as far as I'm aware, the views that are coming from places elsewhere are not being factored into that overall number, so I don't think it really matters all that much. I think quite clearly the sponsors and Warner Bros. And everything else in between are happy with what AEW is doing for the most part. Of course, the show isn't perfect, but no wrestling show is. And I'll be damned, even in the midst of the fact that maybe my love for professional wrestling isn't at that point anymore where I'm watching every single weekly show. I'll be damned if I'm gonna go ahead and give up on AEW as an entire company when I survived the demons that were being thrown at me by WWE in the mid to late 2010s, okay? 2016 withstanding, we're not looking at you. You were perfect, down to the last minute detail, but everything else around you, yeah, a struggle. Down bad. Horrendous. Watching these holiday episodes makes me wish I was on Oceanic Flight 815. Where's TikTok? TikTok's not here yet, but I want to be on it right now because this shit stinks.
I'm not sure you deserve a rematch anyway. I was always your most vocal supporter. I was the guy that believed in you.
Oh, please, cut the...
Shut up. A week ago, you guys were like, this is a new era. What the people want, we'll give them. The people want an IC title match. Big fucking deal. Look at this. Ronda Rousey and Natalya. Happy, happy, joy, joy. Happy, happy new year. What a great episode that was. I got these mental scars. So simply put, no, AEW keep cooking. I might not tune in week to week personally, and maybe you'll never catch me for an episode of Collision again, but you'll always have me for pay-per-views because they always slap. And I think the current era of AEW that we're in right now really could be considered the Renaissance era. With things such as the Continental Classic and the introduction of new stars and new stories, this is becoming a really enjoyable era, and I think the ratings of this show will slowly come back over time. Not to mention, even with the deemed image that they're failing, AEW is still smashing it out the park with various million-dollar cates, and that doesn't happen if people aren't interested in some way, shape, or form. All honeymoon eras and all honeymoon phases must come to an end, and for what AEW had for what was their honeymoon phase, that may have ended, it may have dwindled, but thankfully, the absolute peak that we refer to as Prime AEW was actually so high that now what we're actually left with in reality is a very good damn professional wrestling show. And I honestly think that AEW in its current position with the absolute stacked roster that it has is only a few tweaks away from being in its golden era again.